Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm here to talk about children's rights. I run a children's rights organization called Them Before Us, and the idea is them, the children, need to come before us, the adults. Now, when I talk about children's rights, there's a lot of conservatives that are like, no, we don't want any of that business here, right? And that's because children's rights has been misunderstood. It's been misused. It's been misapplied to say something like, well, children have a right to transgender treatment, right? Children have a right to sexually identify and have the schools keep it secret from their parents in the name of privacy. Well, that's not what children's rights are, right? It's not. You already know the effectiveness of advocating for children's rights because you're already doing it when it comes to their primary right, and that is their right to life, right? We have made incredible advancements in the fight against abortion because we have emphasized the rights of children, specifically their primary right, their right to life. Now, that is a natural right. It's a right that children have whether or not our laws recognize it. We advocate for it because it's a natural right. My organization advocates for children's rights on this side of the womb. We advocate for children's right to be known and loved by their mother and father. Now, there's a lot of confusion out there about rights. These days, anything adults really, really want will be termed a right, right? A right to housing, a right to government-funded birth control, right? A right to health care. And so for lay people like me, it's really helpful to identify what makes something a natural right. And in my book, Them Before Us, my co-author and I, because we are lay people, right? You've got scholars like Nancy Pearcey who are going to be able to outline these natural rights from a academic perspective. You have people like Robert George, who wrote the foreword for our book, who can give it to you from a scholarly perspective. But for the lay people, let me give you what I call the 3 rules that make it a right test, so that you too can identify when something really is a natural right. The first rule that makes it a right is it's pre-government, right? A real natural right existed before government came about. And so when we look at a child's right to life, we see, yep, that's pre-government. It's a natural right. A child's right to their mother and father is pre-government. Like whether you are on Team Homo erectus or Team Adam and Eve, this thing has been around way before government, a child's connection to their parents. Next, it's a natural right if nobody has to provide it for you. If you have to dig it up from the ground, bottle it, package it, ship it, it's not a natural right, right? If it's a natural right, you already have it. You have your right to life. If you are alive, your parents are alive, your parents exist as well. It's a natural right if no one has to provide it. And finally, it's a natural right if there's equal distribution, if everybody gets the same amount, right? It's not a natural right if it can vary in degrees. For example, a dorm room versus a $12 million mansion in Martha's Vineyard, right? If there's equal distribution, if you all get the same amount naturally, it's a natural right. The right to life is a natural right because we all get the same amount. We get 1. A child's right to their mother and father is a natural right because we all get the same amount. Exactly 2. 1 mom and 1 dad. And then for those of you who are concerned that children's rights is going to conflict with parental rights, it doesn't. It comes at it from the same problem from 2 different angles, right? Parental rights come top down, children's rights go bottom up. Think of it this way. As a parent, you care which baby goes home with you from the hospital, right? You don't want just any kid. There's something really special about that baby, the one you have the biological connection to. Well, guess what? The baby cares what parent they go home with from the hospital as well. Right? They don't want just any parent. They want their own mom and dad. Thankfully, we have hundreds of organizations fighting for children's right to life. But when I started getting into this fight, I realized there's no organizations fighting for children's rights to their mother and father. So how did I get into all of this? Well, 10 years ago, I was not an activist. This was not on my radar. I was a mom a pastor's wife in Seattle. I was adjusting to bringing my fourth child home. We adopted him from China, and so there was a lot of adjustment and a lot of transition happening in our family, and that's it. That's all I was focused on, was like, how can I be a mom of four, live in this crazy liberal city, and like serve my church community, right? But then, gay marriage. Like, the topic of gay marriage really entered my world because the state of Washington was debating the definition of marriage. And what I heard right after President Obama evolved on the topic of gay marriage was that suddenly it seemed that every media outlet could now accuse traditional marriage supporters of being bigots. Right? And that's all I heard. Like, every time I turned on the news, right? Anytime I looked on my social media feed, it was just bigotry, bigotry, right? There's no possible reason to support traditional marriage except hatred, homophobia, and bigotry. Now that's a problem. A problem for all of you, I know, because I've met a lot of traditional marriage supporters, and you love your gay family and friends. Right? You just recognize that there's something distinct and special about this one human relationship of marriage, and that it serves a critical social function. You probably know that it's the most child-friendly institution the world has ever known. And the reason why is because it's the only relationship that unites the two people to whom children have a natural right, and that's their mom and dad. And like you, I also have people in my life that I love who identify as gay and lesbian. My mom has been in a relationship with her partner for 35 years, and I love them. I don't consider her partner my mother, but I consider her partner my friend, right? And just like you are loving, serving, hopefully sacrificing for those who identify as gay and lesbian in your life. In fact, if you're a Christian, I would say that that's a biblical mandate, right? That you be compassionate, loving, and sacrificial to those who identify themselves differently than we do. But that does not mean compromising on what marriage is, right? When it comes to policy concerns, and especially when it comes to the church, and what the church says marriage is, and what Scripture determines that marriage is. So when I got into all of this marriage debate, what I realized is the whole conversation was obsessively focused on what adults want, right? It was all about the adults. It was all about their desires, their hopes, their dreams. And lost in the middle of all of it was kids. What I heard the other side saying is, kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads. But what that really means is kids don't care if they've lost their mom or dad. Now, I've worked with kids for a couple decades. I have not yet met a kid who lost a relationship with their mom or dad, who didn't mourn, who didn't stay up late in the middle of that church lock-in wondering, who's my dad? Where is he? Why did my mom leave? It's what we call in the children's rights world a primal wound, something that cuts so deep to the human experience that I'll even have 45-year-old men on the phone with me breaking down, talking about how painful it was when his parents divorced and dad moved out of state and he never saw him again. You cannot mess with a child's relationship with their mom or dad without messing with their whole life. So in the gay marriage debate, there was a lot of focus ahead of time on the impact that it was going to have on adults, specifically the baker, the photographer, and the florist. And that's true. There's been fallout for religious Americans who disagree. But the biggest fallout has been on kids. What has happened after gay marriage is when we redefined marriage, we redefined parenthood. When we made husbands and wives optional in marriage law, mothers and fathers became optional in parenting law. So in 2019, Virginia stripped the words mother and father from their parenthood laws. And with the help of Reproductive Technologies, for the first time since slavery, Virginia termed human beings property in their law, and that would be embryos. In 2018, Washington State redefined parenthood. It used to be that biology or adoption made you a parent, but now, in the name of equality, now parents can become parents to an unrelated child because they intend to parent that child. Unlike adoptive parents like me that rightly have to go through months of vetting and screening and background checks to have an unrelated child placed in our home, now if you can put together sperm, egg, and womb, you can walk out of the hospital with a baby with no genetic connection to you, all in the name of non-discrimination. And as Nancy Pearcey rightly identified, now we can put 2 women or 2 men on a child's birth certificate. And as my friend Jeff Schaefer, formerly at ADF, says, it's a strange sort of lying when the state says that a child can have 2 mothers and no father. But that's where we are, right? You would be hard-pressed to find any federal government agency that even says that children should have a mother and father, right? To do so constitutes discrimination. So here's the thing. The law can say that mothers and fathers are optional in the life of children, but you will never legislate away a child's longing for their mom and dad. They're going to want them, whether or not our laws say that they should. One of the things that we do at Them Before Us is we catalog the stories of kids who have lost a mother and father, and we kind of put these in 3 different groups. The first one is kids who have lost a mom and dad due to divorce or abandonment. That's a big bulk of kids out there. The second one is kids created through reproductive technologies, where they were intentionally severed from a biological parent at conception because of sperm donation, egg donation, or surrogacy. And finally, it's kids with LGBT parents, right, who don't have a mother or father because of an adult desire was prioritized above their rights, where the family was formed around the parents' romantic attractions rather than around their natural rights. So this family breakdown train, it didn't start with gay marriage, right? It actually began with no-fault divorce. And that's not something we spend a lot of time focusing on, right? But marriage has been the most child-friendly institution the world's ever known because it puts mother and father together for life. Kids don't just need their mom and dad for the first 4 months or the first 4 years or the first 14 years. They need their mom and dad permanently. And what no-fault divorce communicated is, well, this marriage is going to be a marriage as long as the adults are happy, right? Now, there are some legitimate reasons for divorce, but 70% of divorces in our country today don't take place because of abuse or abandonment or even adultery. 70% of divorces today take place because adults have fallen out of love or because of communication issues. Well, divorce inflicts lifelong harm on kids. When I was writing my book and I was doing the research on divorce, what made me really need to step away was the statistic that 50% of kids who live in 2 different homes develop 2 different personalities. They're literally living in different worlds. They have to become a different person with mom and a different person with dad. If we're serious about kids, their health and well-being, we're going to address the incredible fallout of no-fault divorce. Well, when we redefined marriage, they said, oh, okay, well, if marriage is just about adult happiness, well, what makes me happy is being married to another man or another woman. Yep, that's pretty sound logic, right? If we don't think that marriage is about a child-centric union because kids need a mother and father for life, then what's to say that they need a mother and father at all? And now the next stop in that family redefinition train is polygamy. The town of Somerville, Massachusetts legalized polygamy in 2020 because there's no legal argument anymore against group marriage, right? If marriage is just a vehicle of adult fulfillment, well, some adults are fulfilled with 7 people in their relationship. So once we step away from a child-centric understanding of marriage, well, kids simply become items to be cut and pasted into any and every adult relationship. Kids have been losing their mother or father throughout history since the beginning of time. We used to have generations of kids who were fatherless because of tragedy due to war. Before the invention of modern medicine, mothers used to die routinely in childbirth. But tragedy is not the reason why children are losing their mother and father today. These days, kids are losing their mother or father primarily because adult desires are being prioritized above their rights. When kids lose a mother and father to tragedy, we mourn. When kids lose their mother or father intentionally, it's an injustice. And it's something that we need to stand against. So this family redefinition train is fueled by adult-centric narratives. Things like, well, if I'm happy, the kids will be happy. Or things like, well, love makes a family. And all of those are really just really kind of a shroud to say, if I want it, I should be able to have it. A lot of that is also made possible by the reproductive technology industry, what my friend Jennifer Law calls big fertility. And so I want to spend a little bit of time contrasting reproductive technologies and adoption. Because when I say children have a right to their mother and father, a lot of you guys who understand the importance of adoption are like, whoa there, girl. Right? So let's spend some time talking about that. First of all, reproductive technologies, especially third-party reproduction, where you're involving a third party, either somebody else's sperm, somebody else's egg, or somebody else's womb, that always violates children's rights. Right? You are always saying your connection, your right to be known and loved by your mother and father is not as important as what I want. Right? So IVF, for those of you who care, I mean, I know that this is a tough topic because we love babies, don't we? Right? We Christians, we conservatives, we love babies. That is not what reproductive technologies are about. Only 7% of children created in a laboratory will be born alive. Only 7%. Most of them will spend their life in a freezer. They will be discarded because they are deemed non-viable. They'll be deemed the wrong sex. They'll be selectively reduced, which is aborted. Okay? So IVF is not a child-friendly process. Sperm, egg donation, and surrogacy always separates a child from a parent to whom they have a natural right. Now, that's almost the exact opposite of adoption. Okay? Adoption is an institution centered around the well-being of children. Reproductive technologies are a marketplace centered around the desires of adults. And they're distinct from each other in three ways. The first one is in adoption, the child is the client. I used to work at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. And my boss would say, the adults may pay us, but the kid is our client. If adoption is done well, every child that needs a home is going to find one. But not every adult who wants a kid is going to get one, right? There are some people who have no business being an adoptive parent. In reproductive technologies, the adult is the client. The goal is to get them a baby no matter what. And a lot of times that means placing kids with adults that never would have passed an adoption screening. Number two, adoption mends a wound. Third-party reproduction inflicts a wound, right? I have an adopted child. He has a wound. Adoption creates a wound. Adoption severs a child from their first family. And I know that sometimes pro-lifers are like, no, we can't ever talk about the negatives of adoption. But we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can say that we are pro-life, and you know what? Adoption does have some challenges to it. And if you're an adoptive parent, you know what I'm talking about, right? I love my son. He belongs with us. We're so grateful for him. But I cannot fully compensate for everything that he has lost. Adoption seeks to mend the wound that was created when he lost his mother and father. Reproductive technologies inflict the wound. They say, what I want is more important, so I will cut you off from one of your biological parents. And as a result, number three, adoptive parents are filling the void for their child, right? They are able to mourn with their child, walk through it with their child, grieve with their child, because they're not responsible for the child's loss. The one study that we have that contrasts outcomes for adopted kids versus kids created through reproductive technologies shows that kids of sperm and egg donation, they suffer psychologically because they cannot talk about their wound. They cannot talk about their loss because they're talking to the person that created it. A just society cares for orphans. It doesn't manufacture them. So what do we do in all of these issues, right? When we look at all of these issues, marriage, divorce, reproductive technologies, adoption, those are not separate issues. They're all one issue. And the question is, are you respecting or are you disregarding the rights of children? And in all of these conversations, whether they are policy decisions or whether they are personal decisions, the solution is the same. Adults need to do the hard things so that children don't have to. In all of those situations, somebody is going to have to make a sacrifice, right? In the struggling marriage, somebody's going to have to work it out. Somebody's going to have to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the adults or is it going to be the kids? In a situation of infertility, heartbreaking, somebody's going to have to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the adults or is it going to be the child? In a situation of somebody who experiences same-sex attraction, who would likely be an incredible father or incredible mother, somebody's going to have to do the hard thing. Is it going to be the adults who form their families around the rights of children, or is it going to be the child that has to lose their mother and father to fit in to those romantic attractions? At Them Before Us, we think that it should be the adults that do the hard thing, not the kids. And in the world of children's rights, nobody gets a pass. Everybody, single, married, gay, and straight, must conform to the rights of children. And finally, I'll just say, I know that you've heard that you're on the wrong side of history, right? You're not. You will never be on the wrong side of history when you are on the right side of children. So, thanks so much.